This is the Meaning Business Podcast, your go-to source for business tips, advice, growth, and exit strategies, hosted by Bruce Kudry and Peter Spinder. Each episode, we bring you real stories, expert insights, and practical advice to help you succeed in today's market. Let's dive in.
So Pete, and I should welcome Kayleigh. Should I welcome Kayleigh today?
Hey Bruce, hello listeners and viewers, and hi Kayleigh.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We've got Kayleigh from NB Lawyers, Property Law, with us today, and we're going to have a chat about all things legal potentially.
Sounds
See where it takes us. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So I'll tell you a quick story. We had some guys sell a business recently, $12 million for the asset value and $5 million for the goodwill. Had quite a few entities operating the business. And it was clear that they needed to get some good accounting and financial advice and legal advice prior to sale on how to structure things to manage their Division 7A loans that they had and capital gains tax. And just generally, other areas, employee entitlements and just many things, whether it should be a share sale or an asset sale, all that sort of stuff. But they didn't want to spend the money in getting legal and financial advice. And they wanted to just go with their own ideas and the people that they've always worked with. And ultimately that transaction completed, and then they're running around angry because they've got to pay a lot of tax and they're sort of saying, it's not our fault, why didn't you tell us, that sort of thing. So it happens a lot, and it's false economy, and I don't know if you see it much, Kayleigh, in your world, but it's really frustrating for us. And conversely, some other guys who bought a business office about 3 years ago in the Acacia Ridge, Rockley area, have their business has boomed. And we were talking to them the other day and sort of saying, what's the story? Why is it going so well? What have you done? Oh, nothing. Well, it can't be nothing. And what we found out is that they've paid for good advice in the areas they're not experts at, because nobody can be good at everything.
No.
And it's really showing out in their recruitment, in their property management, in the engineering they use in their marketing. They've just gone and sought out the best of the best, and it's really paying dividends, and you can see it.
That's so important, isn't it? So what we're pretty much highlighting, number one, is you need to pay for advice in order to future-proof yourself, and don't be thinking of the advice as a direct cost. It's an investment. It's a risk mitigation strategy. It's a, so you're not running around like a headless chook. It reduces your stress.
Yeah.
You get better impact. But the second thing is that not every advisor rather is the same as every other advisor. So there's advisors, there's good advisors, and there's great advisors. So hunt around and really find the right advisors and listen to them and take their advice. Now, Kayleigh, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, so I'm part of NB Property Law, but we're a law firm based in Brisbane. We've got 4 divisions that make up the overall law firm. So I've got employment law, commercial law, migration, and I take care of the property and estate planning law. So basically my role at the firm, I'm the director there. We take care of all things property related and also estate planning. So do everything from commercial property sales and purchases to retail, commercial leasing work, do a bit of body corporate law work, and also do just mum and dad residential conveyancing. And then on the estate planning side, everything in terms of estate planning. So, getting wills with testamentary trust in some circumstances and powers of attorneys drafted, and also estate administration work as well. Basically, we just help our clients to, help them find a way forward and make sure that they're protected and know what they're entering into.
Absolutely. So you would have seen over the years these sort of situations come, like what Bruce explained, where either they don't want to spend or they've spent some money, they get the advice, they don't listen to the advice. And then on the flip side, you probably would have seen situations where you've served clients and the outcome's fantastic. And they come back and say, wow, I can't believe that, we were able to achieve that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, unfortunately, people are sometimes, scared and shy to spend a bit of money up front. But, those people that are not spending the money, they're generally burnt, or, you've gone with a cheaper option, which is generally an inferior option, and then they've got the wrong advice, and of course that's then ended up costing them more money in the long term to try and resolve the issue. So it is important that clients are investing in good legal advice, in proper accounting, financial advice, so that they can get the proper information that they need to help them move forward with their business transaction and what they're actually investing in.
Because you get what you pay for in life.
do.
Doesn't matter what it is, a piece of furniture or advice, you get what you pay for.
Absolutely. I was actually thinking just the other night, so we moved house and we had some chairs that got moldy. Anyway, we threw it out and went and bought some cheap furniture from a cheap furniture store. And the reason we did that, we got young kids and they're still spilling stuff, right? So we take the chairs home. Within 2 days, it's already covered in food. But what I've noticed is that the chairs that we bought about a year and a half ago, they're actually getting quite hard to sit on now because the foam is getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And I was at the dining table and I was thinking to myself, man, if I had just spent a little bit more and got better quality, I wouldn't be sitting here thinking, man, I got to swap these chairs out now, which is now going to cost me more money. But then the hassle of having to go back to the furniture store and the hassle of going through that. And the same thing in business. We had a situation a few months ago where a client had some, they were going through some issues. And I said, look, go and get legal advice and go on, seek some decent lawyers and to assist you. We actually were talking about this client beforehand with Kayleigh. And they haven't done that, and instead they decided to wing it themselves. Now, obviously, things have happened, and it's actually cost them a lot more money and a lot more stress than what it would have had they actually sought the advice. And it's so frustrating. Why do you think that is? I mean, why do you think people sometimes look at advisors and go, okay, well, that's just too much money, or, I'm not spending money on that, I don't need the advice. Like, what drives that sort of behavior, do you think?
Yeah, I think they're not experienced. Like they're not wanting to invest in the right services because of that. And, they're going to get burnt by that. Once they get burnt, they'll then realize the value that the service that they were offered could have brought to them and could have, mitigated risk for them. So unfortunately, they're just not educated and, don't have the knowledge to realize what the implication is going to be in the long run. And they just want to save a few dollars at the outset, which in the long run ends up costing them a lot more to resolve down the track when things go sour.
Absolutely.
You look at successful people, they'll pay for good advice, A, because they can afford to, but B, they know it's worth it.
Yep.
It's the people that are less successful that aren't spending the money, so we need to learn from that.
Well, either the less successful, or it could be that you're new to that space. So
right.
I remember the first property that we purchased, we were told, you've got to go and get lawyers involved and get conveyancing. We're like, what for? I've walked around, I'm happy with it, And I remember another business partner of mine, Chris, at the time, I called him up. I'm like, Chris, can you have a look at this? This is what we're thinking of doing. And he's a seasoned property investor. He's bought a lot of properties. He's like, Peter, do not skimp on the conveyancing. Do not skip the legals. Spend the money because it's worth it, And so since then, every property transaction, Chris is always in the back of my head, do it. Because you just don't know what's around the corner. You don't know what's hiding that has been uncovered, that a good advisor will uncover.
In fact, I was just talking to Peter about this morning. A guy who was talking to was looking to buy a property and it had a 359-page contract for this contract. So he was going to read the contract himself. And he thought, surely in 359 pages, there's something I'm going to miss something. So I took it to the lawyer, a specialist lawyer, and I'd like to interrupt my own conversation by saying, Kayleigh, I'm sure you'd agree, there's GPs who treat everything.
Correct.
And then there's specialists, heart surgeons and people that deliver babies and so on, right? And it's got to the point now where a GP can't really do heart surgery.
No.
Right? And I guess it's the same in your world. There's people who really know estate planning, for example, and testamentary trusts and all the nuances and skills and things that you should employ there, right?
Definitely.
So it's worth getting a specialist on board. Anyway, this guy took his 359-page contract to a specialist lawyer who read it and they said, don't buy it. He was ready to go. Yeah. Buried right in the middle was this horrible story. So it's definitely pays usually to get the right advice.
It is, and especially something of that, investment, like that wouldn't have been a small purchase for him. He would have been out of pocket, probably millions of dollars, if it went wrong. So it is important to make sure that you're having contracts reviewed before they're actually signed. Once they're signed, it's a legally binding document. You can't do a lot with it. So it's highly important to get that advice before they're signing on the dotted line.
And he was walking around just like Peter was, what do I need? Do I like the house? He was exactly the same. I like this property. I'm ready to buy.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he lives in Queensland. The property was in Ringwood in Victoria. he didn't really know the market there, and there's apparently there's a caveat emptor thing applies to property there,
Yeah.
a bit more than here. So it was very, very, good thing for him to do that, and money well spent. End up buying another property.
Which is, if you then add the layer of business, you add the whole commercial aspect, all of a sudden it gets so complicated, and it's, and selling a business, for example, is not like selling a residential house. And we've had this discussion in other podcasts, haven't we? That it's not a simple process. There's so many moving parts and so many things.
Businesses are unique.
Absolutely.
They're not a commodity.
Absolutely. So we've got to be wearing that hat as business owners that, okay, we don't know everything. We need to have the right team beside us. Kayleigh, tell us, and you mentioned that No Borders Legal, you've got the different divisions. So what are the sort of common themes, common mistakes that you've seen and you're picking up over the years that business owners tend to make when it comes to the legals, whether it's commercial property, whether it's commercial legal or employment law or anything like that?
Yeah, I suppose with the commercial property, it's often the when they're purchasing and the actual entity that they're purchasing in, a lot of times we'll see that they've not got the actual correct legal structure set up, or they decide, down the track then they want to change it. So the big thing for them there is they're paying transfer duty once the property settles, and then they've got to pay transfer duty again when they want to actually change the structure to what should be a more appropriate structure to suit their needs. Sometimes they'll do it before, settlement. Again, there's still cost involved, obviously not as huge as transfer duty bill, but they'll have to pay, for what's called a deed of rescission to rescind the original contract, enter into a new one with the correct entity. I think
It's a lot less than the stamp duty, though.
Yeah, a lot less. And it's hoping they, we get the structure right, that at that point, but it's not always the way. I suppose the other thing as well with commercial property purchases is often there's a clause in the contract regarding whether the property is part of a supply or not, so GST implications. A lot of people don't get advice on that, and they don't know whether it's a supply, and they could be up for GST when potentially they could have avoided that. So often with a property purchase, if there is a lease in place, it's considered a supply, and therefore we're not paying GST on top of that. So sometimes, it might not be that there's actually a lease in place, but if the client's purchasing the property to run their business out of it, we can, do up a lease that starts just before settlement, so they avoid that GST bill. So again, that's something that we see from time to time that will be incorrect if they've come to us with a signed contract. I suppose in the other sides of the business, probably the employment law space, raft of issues that pop up for them from time to time. But, the big thing is employers just not even having proper employment contracts drafted, and then policies and procedures as well. So without a proper employment contract, you don't have as much control over the employees. There's nothing to protect the business owner from what the employee, can and can't do. We haven't strictly outlined, what their obligations are, what their rights are. Talked about, termination and things like that within that contract. And the policies and procedures will supplement the employment contract. So the reason that they're separate as well is that they can be updated from time to time. The employment contract, both parties need to agree to amend that. Whereas the policies and procedures, at any point the employer wants to amend them, they can do so without, needing consent from the employee themselves. I suppose in the commercial space then, some of their issues that they'll come across is probably terms and conditions, just not having proper terms and conditions drafted. A big one, and it's so, it's what every business should have. You're providing a service, you're providing a product, whatever it is, you need something to, govern that. What is the product or service that you're providing? Sometimes, there's installment deposits and payments payable along the way, and what are the representations that the business is providing? What are the warranties that are available? It all needs to be stipulated and documented, quite clearly and succinctly in the terms and conditions. So, both parties can rely on them if something goes wrong, and, if they need to, go and take legal action, making sure that the other side then is paying the legal bill for them for breaching that contract. So it is really important to have properly drafted terms and conditions in place.
I feel like and I've had what I'm about to say. This is a conversation with other people over the years. I don't think you and I have had this conversation yet, Bruce, and this might be a little bit controversial to put it out there, but I'm going to do it anyway. But I feel like whenever someone steps into business for the first time, they get their first ABN, register the business. It's almost like, okay, just like driving a car, you're going to go through a process of, okay, you've got to learn about the car. You've got to learn about how to drive the car. You've got to be aware of different things. You're not just given, your driver's license and go off and drive the car. You've got to go through a period of education. And sometimes I feel like, it'd be fantastic where we had almost like a mandatory system say, you know what, you want to be in business? You've got to learn about these different facets and aspects of business, because it could save so much time, heartache, money, stress, pressure. If you are aware of these things, and as you're talking, I'm listing these things, I'm thinking, man, often it's right at the beginning where people don't understand the legal structure issues because they just don't know. They don't understand, an accountant might not be aware of these things, and they purchase them the wrong way. 3, 4, 5 years down the track, they go to get another loan, or they want to sell their business. And then all of a sudden they realize that, man, 4 years ago, I did that the wrong way. And they're thinking, why didn't someone tell me about this? How come I didn't know about it? Or like the employment side, so many businesses we work with in the advisory space, one of the first things we do is, okay, what does your HR structure look like? Have you got procedures in place? Have you got position descriptions, et cetera, et cetera? Most people don't even know about those things.
I'm just thinking along with what you're saying, rather than the pre-purchase or pre-startup education, I think as an opportunity, don't know whether you do this, to do an audit, so any business, not just an audit on their employment agreements, but maybe it's their estate, their structure, their wills. Because, the funny thing about that is that people quite often leave that they don't want to talk about, or it's in the cost of, they're not paying for it anyway. Or the beneficiaries of the estate end up paying for it anyway, right? And it's probably going to cost more later. So it's better to get it done properly now. So an order on a business or a business owners would be a great idea, I think.
I think it would be. And I think from my point of view, and, being in business for a long time now and seeing so many different things, let's put money aside for a moment. And let's talk about the fact that it isn't just money that gets impacted when you have adverse issues, when you've got to, pay, when you realize, for example, you're in the wrong structure and you think, okay, so you got to go down a different path. It's the stress, it's the money, the time, it's that impact on everything else around you. So you got to think, okay, well, it might cost a little bit up front, but man,
no. I think we should think about it as an investment. It's an investment.
It has to be thought of as
protecting what you've got now. Protecting where it's going to be in the future. And it's just a wise investment. It's just like you decide whether you're going to service your car or not service your car. You're going to keep your car clean or just let it get wrecked, Would be a
brainer.
Yeah.
Some people just don't.
I love a clean car.
Yeah.
Don't let your kids in it. Well, my kids, and I got green.
Use the car.
Green paint in mine.
No eating in the car, that's for sure. So, is that something you could do for people?
Yeah, definitely. It's something, I suppose the employment team probably do a bit more of it, but we definitely do it as a holistic approach for all facets of business, because it is something I think that's very, very warranted, and most businesses should make sure that they've got all the checks and balances in place.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. Like, they don't necessarily know, even like things like trademarks and stuff, like, trademarking some of their business logos. I've got particular slogan stuff, looking into that for them and making sure they're properly protected and they've got everything in place.
And then they've got it ready to sell as well by having that protection and that system in place.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, if we talk about selling a business, and we've talked about this before, that we've got different asset classes, we've got tangible, intangible, and tangible things we can feel and see, but then there's the intangible. And so if you've got trademarks, if you've got patents, if you've got things that are tied to your business, that actually adds inherent value, and it makes it more attractive.
Value.
It protects the value.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it's, I guess, it's an interesting conversation, interesting thing that people need to business owners need to be aware of. Now, if we look forward into the future, and so we're recording this at the moment in December of 24, we're moving into a new year. We've got a lot of changes technology-wise. We've got political changes both in Australia and also globally. We see there's a lot of things happening. What changes are you seeing, Kayleigh, that business owners need to be aware of from a legal perspective moving forward?
Yeah, so for us in the property law space, like, we've had a lot of changes this past year and still some coming into the new year. In terms of property law, we've had a whole new property law legislation come out. So our previous one's over 50 years old. It was thankfully passed in the end of 2023, but it won't come into play until August of next year. So now any person selling a property will have to give a seller's disclosure notice, which brings us in line with what the southern states have down in Victoria and in New South Wales as well. We've had a whole lot of raft of new body corporate legislations as well introduced this year. The other ones is more the tenancy laws. They're more from the residential point of view, though, that we've seen come into play. And then the other thing, residentially, we've had the federal government's home buyers scheme. The bill was passed on 27th of November 24, and that will come into play as well from next year, where the government can assist buyers basically with owning a home, but they'll take a 30% share in that home.
Right.
But that will then be repaid when the seller sells the property. So they'll get 30% of the profit basically. I suppose from more the commercial point of view, into next year, I think in terms of like the leasing space, we're seeing that probably more of the industrial and medical properties, like they're seeming to be more of the properties that are getting, better traction and more attention at the moment, more so over the retail spaces and just, commercial office spaces. So I think that'll continue on steadily into next year. I think probably for retail, like a lot of people that, gone online and stuff like that. So they're just not as highly sought after as what they previously used to be. So I think that will keep tracking. In terms of change of government, it's whether they keep in place, the laws that we've got, or, I think there'll be changes that will come into place that we'll see from next year. Basically from January of next year, any property sold, we used to have a threshold for what's called a foreign resident withholding certificate, whereas every person that was selling a property over $750,000 had to apply for this foreign resident holding with certificate. It's now no limit on that. So from next year, we're going to have to apply for anyone selling a property, and we'll have to get this certificate to make sure that they're not a foreign resident owing basically capital gains tax, and if they are, it'll be paid as part of settlement, and it's the rate has slightly increased as well for that. So a few changes, I think, and things that we'll forecast that will happen for next year.
And what about from an employment side? I mean, I know if I think purely as a business owner, sometimes as business owners, we feel like the world's against us from an employment law perspective, whether it's right or wrong. I'm just sort of giving you my thoughts on a perception that I've seen out there. Is it tightening? Is it becoming more complicated, more convoluted to be an employer and to manage a team and manage growth in an organisation from people point of view?
It is. There's been a lot of change introduced over this last year, in terms of like right to disconnect. So employees now have that right to disconnect. Employer can't just contact them after hours.
And that's being extended next year, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. And I think the other thing we're going to see as well, a lot of people include restraint of trade in contracts. I think that we're going to see legislation come into place to govern that a bit more, to restrict employees on what they can restrain an employee from doing. So I think that'll be an interesting space to watch and see where that goes. I suppose this last year as well, like there's been a lot of psychological, the onus has been placed on employers to deal with, mental health and things like that within the workplace, allowing employees leave for domestic violence and things like that. So there is a lot of obligations on the employer now to basically make sure, their employees are happy and keeping them, running smoothly. So it is a big task for employers, and they do have a lot of burden on them to deal with as an employer that they haven't previously had. So
I mean, I'm in favour of a lot of these changes. I think, looking after our team, our people, our employees, I actually don't like the word employee because it feels like they're subservient to us, whereas I see people, they're a team. We're a team. We're collectively, everybody from the janitor upwards, we're all collectively working towards a similar sort of goal. I think that's how we're going to view it. But unfortunately, you can also see the flip side where we do see sometimes the unscrupulous employee, I'll use that word in this case, they're not the team member. They're the ones that are trying to get as much out of the system as they can, and they can make it very challenging. Sometimes we do have poor performers in a business that we need to move on, but then moving them on can be quite challenging.
Difficult. Yeah.
So it's that sort of.
I think the other thing is that there's a lot of employers who are ignorant of the laws, the changes in the laws and their responsibility or their obligation too.
Yeah, and they've just got no idea, a lot of them as well, like something that comes to
That's right.
the team.
But that word ignorance, I mean, it's an interesting one because sometimes it's ignorance because, well, I just can't be bothered. But sometimes it's ignorance because, well, look, there's just so many things to do in business. Like it's just forever changing and it's hard to keep up. And I just wrote down 2-3 words here, actually: reactionary versus proactive. Now, a lot of instances in our case, I quite often see a lot of reactionary actions being taken by business owners, especially in the legal side. I guess the question is it worth being proactive? And if it's worth being proactive, what does it mean from a legal point of view? Does that mean that every year as an employer, I should be coming to you and saying, hey, Kayleigh, can your team look at the contracts? Or as a owner of properties, hey, Kayleigh, can your team look at our property structures? Is that sort of what should be happening?
It should, yeah. And I think definitely in the employment law space as well, like it's so much better for employers to be proactive rather than reactionary, you know. But we'd rather the client come to the firm with, you know, basically getting us to look after all their legals, you know, making sure that they've got, like I said earlier, the proper employment contracts and policies and procedures. You know, if they've got an employee that's acting out and, you know, needs performance management, they come to us ahead of time. If they're looking to make someone redundant, that they're coming to us to make sure the correct process is followed. Because otherwise, if they just go ahead and do things with employees, that's when the problem will arise and it'll fester and it'll be a much bigger issue for the employer to deal with. And, you know, then we're reacting to that problem, and the solution is a lot harder to solve. It costs a lot more money, and, you know, there's just difficulties with it. And it's the same with, you know, the properties and the estate planning and things like that. Like you said earlier, like, you know, you don't have to have a will. You pass away without one, though. It's gonna be a longer process to basically arrange for probate and get that all sorted. You know, there can often be conflicts that will arise. So it's just much better to have these things and documents in place to make sure that we're protected, you know, at the outset, so that we are proactive and we're not just reacting to a problem constantly and putting out fires. It's stressful. It takes more time, costs more money. No one wants to be in that situation.
It's such a challenging discussion. So if we change ourselves and go, okay, we're 3 medical doctors, right? We're going to have literally the exact same conversation, whether it's about preventing obesity, whether it's about, you know, smoking. And okay, then we could be legislators for government looking after you know, road incidents. Okay, well, how do we stop people from drink driving and all of those sort of things, and educating people? It can be so challenging. You know, we know in all of these instances, being proactive with your health, proactive with the way you drive or in business pays off in dividends, but we're still as human beings tend to be for the moment, in the moment, and okay, I'm going to be reactionary.
Living for the day.
Living for the day. Yeah.
Just on that, the proactive thing. So what I've seen is that sometimes you unknowingly take the burden away. So a couple of occasions I've seen farmer, 2 sons, one son works in the farm, one son doesn't. Similar scenario to this multiplied, and no will. So the sons are sort of thinking, what happens when dad dies? Who gets the farm? How do we go? I'm working in it. He's not, you know. I have more right. I've had more contribution to the sick. Father goes, does the estate planning, sorts it out. Everyone knows where they stand. That unspoken cloud hanging over everyone's head is lifted. Yeah. So sometimes by being proactive and doing what you should do, makes sense, just clears the air for everybody.
It does.
But people don't want to address it. It's like, I don't want, you know, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Our businesses are all going to have ups and downs. We're all going to sell our businesses at some stage.
Well, death is that sort of eventuality, but I guess being less morbid, we can also say, okay, well, what about aging? So as we get older, some people, and you know, we know a gentleman, for example, who's starting to develop dementia. Now, this person has got multiple sons in the business, and you can go, okay, well, if that isn't addressed early enough in the piece, then by the time the full-blown dementia hits, how are you going to address that situation? Like, it makes it much, much more difficult. Or let's say we're in a business partnership and then something happens to Bruce. Now, if we haven't addressed that, what does it mean? What is Jane going to do? How's it all going to work? And, you know, so we've got to be thinking and forward planning. And that goes back to several conversations you and I had, Bruce, over the years about planning for eventualities, risk mitigation, having plans in place, and then involving the right sort of advisors is so important.
But it's so obvious. Why don't people do it?
Yeah.
Time and money.
On the money.
And they'd rather just block it out and think about staying.
It's blocking it out. It's too hard. I'll do it tomorrow. I've got too many other things. I've got to pack that crate
I
with.
think it's not urgent.
That's it.
Yeah. It's probably like me when I started work when I was 18. This guy came, I was at the Port Kembla Steelworks, and this guy comes along telling everyone about the benefits of superannuation. And you put more money into super, when you're 60, you'll have a lot of money. None of us were buying into that. We're like, no, mate, we're living for today. Yeah. I want to put some new tyres on my car. But now I'm 60, I'm looking back going, God, I wish I'd put that money into super.
But Bruce, so I'm 44 and I have conversations with our friends our age. We're the only ones out of our friendship circle who have got self-managed super fund, and we're sort of controlling where the money goes and what we do with it. And when we're talking to people about it, they're like, oh, what would you do that? You can't access that till you're 60s and plus. I'm like, okay, but it's still your money. And at some point in time, you will get to that age and you're going to look back and go, man, should have done that.
Yeah.
Shoulda.
Yeah. And it's true. So hopefully people will get a pang of conscience.
Conscience, yeah. No, whatever the word is.
Yeah, that conscience will talk to them and they'll think, oh, really, I should do this and take action rather than sitting back and putting it off. And
Absolutely. So I think, everyone understands the message is very, very clear in terms of what we're talking about at the moment, which is let's be proactive, let's seek the right advisors, let's seek the right solutions and right services.
And see it as an investment.
Absolutely. See it as an investment. And like Kayleigh outlined, over the next 12 months, we've got so many different changes happening. And over the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, so change is constant. So we can't just sit on our laurels and go, okay, well, I've got it done today and that's set forever. So I guess for anyone listening and watching this video, any questions, we'll put your details in the section, wherever you're watching it, listening to us. So broad now. And Kayleigh, so I guess, in terms of being proactive, what's the key message that you would have for our listeners and viewers, and what could they do? What should they actually do if they're business owners and want to be proactive from a legal point of view?
Yeah, I'd say coming to us, making sure that you do a bit of an audit, have a chat to us, let us know what your situation is, what you've currently got in place, what you think, maybe needs to be amended. We can review the documents, have a look, ask you, a series of questions to work out where you're potentially deficient in the business and what documents and things you still need to have put in place, and then work with the business, work with the owner to try and get those, put in place so that they're set in stone for a period of time. And then, reviewing them, probably an annual review, just, touching base and seeing, what's changed. Do we need to potentially update some of the documents? The laws are ever evolving, so that there is changes and things that we need to make sure that we're adapting to the documents that we've previously drafted to cover off on those particular changes that have been introduced.
Fantastic. And one more question from me before we wrap up. If, let's say I'm in a situation where, I'm thinking of selling my business, at what point should I come and talk to a solicitor? At what point should I have that conversation and go, okay, well, I'm thinking about selling?
Early on in the piece, once you've thought about it, have a chat to your solicitor. We want to know about it at the outset, rather than once you've signed a contract and then there's nothing we can do to help you. That's a legally binding contract then. So it's not just us you want to be talking to. As Bruce's story at the start, you want to be talking to your financial advisor and your accountant, because the structuring will be important. So that's recommended as early as possible. A couple of years before the actual sale, so that you can get things put in place and actually, sort out, so you're avoiding, tax and stuff in those situations. So yeah, definitely as early as possible.
Fantastic. Anything else from you, Bruce?
Just to say, the company is called No Borders. So we're based in Queensland. Some of the things we're talking about are Queensland and national law, but you could help anybody anywhere in Australia, basically, right?
Yeah, the migration employment team are more, they're federal jurisdiction. They've got federal laws. More the commercial team though, and property and estate planning, we are more so state-based though here in Queensland.
Okay. That was the only clarification I wanted to make, but it's been really great to have you with us today, Kayleigh, and it's great to talk to you and understand your world. And I'm sure, I really hope that people can understand that talking to people like you is an investment, and you're going to
Absolutely.
get benefit from that, a dividend from that investment over time.
Yep.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kayleigh.
Thank you
Appreciate
both
your
for your
time.
time.
And, thank you,
Appreciate
Bruce,
you
and
having
thank
me
you,
on.
everyone, for listening and watching.